Now it's
There we
recording.
go.
Fabulous.
Awesome.
I see recording.
Cool. So, yeah, first of all, welcome, Amir and SZ. I don't know, but if you wouldn't mind giving a quick intro to everybody, whoever would like to start.
Yeah, I'd love to start. Good morning, everybody. I'm Amir Montezeri. I represent OSTIF.org, the Open Source Technology Improvement Fund. We've been participating in the Securing Critical Projects work group, and I saw your presentation at the town hall meeting on Monday and thought you brought up some really good points. And I actually referenced your white paper when I was talking about OSTIF and our security audits and doing security review of open source projects. So yeah, I just thought I would get involved with this work group as well. And looks like you're working on some really cool stuff too with the security metrics that I find interesting. So thought I'd get involved here as well.
Awesome. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome.
And SZ or Lynn, I'm sorry, but would you?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good morning and let's say good night, because it's 12 a.m.
Good.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm SZ. It's my pleasure to attend this meeting. My background is a software engineer. I work for industrial control system company in Taiwan. I currently participate in two Linux Foundation projects. The first one is CIP, C4 Infrastructure Platform Project. This project aims to establish an open source base layer of industrial grade software to enable the use and implementation of software building blocks for C4 infrastructure. And I'm the steering committee member, former Linux kernel workgroup chair, and active in the security workgroup. And last month, I have the session in Embedded Linux Conference Europe with the topic of the threat modeling, key methodology and applications from open source software C4 infrastructure platform perspective. Another Linux project is OpenChain. I'm the governing board member in OpenChain. The OpenChain project defines effective open source compilers, and the OpenChain standard became the ISO standard last month. Yeah, so in my spare time, yeah, finally.
Yeah.
In my spare time, I contribute various open source projects, such as Linux kernel and Debian. As a Debian developer, I mainly contribute and maintain open source software in the security tools package teams. And this is a Kali upstream. So in this team, we maintain more than 200 security packages, such as Nmap, Beanwork. The goal of the team is to maintain the security-related tools correctly. And we merge back tools from the derivatives. So I have been tracking this workgroup status for months to seek some possible collaboration, either in Debian or CIP projects. So that is my brief introduction. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great.
Nice.
Welcome.
Awesome.
How do you say your name? Can you say it for us?
Yeah, you can call me SZ.
Just SC. Okay, got it. I was wondering if I should try to say SZ, but SC. Thank you.
I will pass some project or Teams link to the chat box.
Great.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. So I posted the meeting notes. If anybody needs the meeting notes or somehow missed it in the chat, I think it kind of goes away if you join. If I post it and then you join. It's in the meeting invite as well. Please add your name to the top. If you have anything for the agenda that you'd like to talk about today, just add it to the bullet points. But I think we've got a discussion on kind of the North Star. I'd also just like to maybe just start with kind of the super high level, let's be, well, I think this will probably come out in the discussion with the requirements, which is kind of the point of that discussion, which is that there is multiple, in my opinion at least, there are multiple work streams doing work that could at least be perceived as overlapping with one another. And that's not necessarily a problem. And that's certainly not a problem that we must fix like immediately. But we should at least rationalize where the interfaces between those things are, so that we're not unnecessarily or accidentally duplicating work. So the thing that I have in my head, I'm going to be super transparent here, is the scorecard project is collecting metrics. The metric project had started collecting metrics. A lot of those metrics are exactly the same metrics. So I don't think there's any reason to have like both of them doing the same things. And I also have like no ego in this at all. So I don't care the slightest bit if the metrics project uses the scorecard project to do the calculations, or any other combination of anything. But I don't want to go down a path and just kind of ignore the problem until it's so obvious that we have two exactly the same projects, full stack, top to bottom. So what I would propose is, as we're having this discussion today, I would submit that we should all kind of just keep an open mind on the kind of focus on the requirements and not so much the implementation or who does it or which work group it's under or anything like that. I think we can all work to make sure that the right thing happens. We need to know what the right thing is first, though, and I think that's the purpose of the requirement doc. I'll open it there. Does anybody want to kind of comment, or am I totally off base? Am I making something out of something that isn't there?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. I agree with that. I think, from my perspective, that is kind of the purpose of the requirements document. So we have these 3 projects that are all doing similar things, and that they're, gathering security data and then trying to make that available for, developers to see how they're doing, and then also for consumers of software to make choices about what software they use. I would, my sort of putting it out there is that I'd love to see all those things kind of converge in the long run, which is why I, started a section called North Star. I think it might take some time, and we kind of need to think about what the roadmap is and how the pieces fit together. But so I don't think there's anything we need to change immediately for anything, but just, be conscious about what we're building and how we're building it and what customer problems we're solving together going forward. Those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, I would echo similar sentiments to both Michael and Kay. I think it makes a lot of sense to make sure we're not duplicating effort. I may have missed a meeting, or there may be some reason, but I was actually a bit surprised about the scorecard project launch, because it was so similar in flavor to a lot of the things we've been doing here. And I know we were talking about kind of what project goes where and how they relate to each other with Kay's document. So I had been a little bit surprised by that. And I definitely agree that finding kind of a direction that we want to go and not duplicating that effort is going to be really important moving forward.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Hey, so this is Kim. I work on the scorecards project. When we set out to start working on this, our requirements were different. It's not actually even metrics. They are Boolean results coming from different projects. And there's, everything has to be objective. So there's no sort of subjective data that we're gathering. we're less interested in the display. We would like this data to be consumed in different places, but that is not something we're actively working on. We're hoping that other places, can ingest or call the CLI and display the results somewhere. And so I think those are some of the differences that were coming out. So that there's not, our scope isn't to expand it into covering things like insights and subjective data. One of the core goals was to make this automatable. So for consumers or for people just trying to call the API or the CLI, sorry. We looked at all of the spreadsheet, the insight spreadsheet data, and went through and tried to see if we could, if there was a lot of overlap and there just wasn't a lot of what we were trying to cover in there. We shared our docs early on, and yeah, it was, even with the CII best practices badge, a lot of those things in there weren't things that you can automate. So that was another key requirement for what we were building.
Okay. So I mean, I guess my, again, super transparent. My quote fear, it's not really a fear, but is that the scorecard project in the scorecard project roadmap is building the UI front end similar to what the metrics are. So if you say that, and obviously the future can change.
Sure.
But if right now you're not envisioning a UI on top of the scorecard and you're limiting scorecard to the mechanics of the collection of objective data, then that's great, because that should just plug into our or any other system, and all is happy. And that also helps us, because that means that we don't need to worry so much about how to collect those same things. We can just call a scorecard.
Yeah, there's no storage right now. It's not, it's just a CLI. It's not running. There's no API, but we have no plans to build a UI.
Okay.
That's helpful.
Cool. I'm happy with that. Okay. Any other comments on this topic before we jump into the Cave's requirement talk?
So I'll just offer a comment real quick. So hearing all that, sounds great. I'm all in favor of having this Uber goal that we're all going towards, and however we slice it as far as implementation, I really don't care. The main thing is that it's accruing towards a common thing. So my concern with scorecards versus metrics dashboard is that on the surface to the outside community, they look very, very similar, and it could be very confusing to developers, maintainers trying to figure out, well, which one am I supposed to use? Why would I use this versus that? We might want to just make it clear that, hey, the scorecard thing is meant for this very specific scenario, and we're going to be a part of this other dashboard in the future, or whatever it ends up being. I just think we should be crisp about what that overall vision is, because I did see some comments on the Hacker News link that was posted about future things that they want to do, and it is verbatim what the metrics dashboard is. So I can see some confusion there. So I just think we should get very crisp about that. But as far as who does the work and how we slice it, right? I mean, that's implementation, and that's great. But just as long as we're working towards the same goal, that's the important part.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. Okay. If there's nothing else, Kay, I believe the floor is yours.
Okay. I saw a note in the chat. Someone was looking for a link to the scorecard project. Can someone drop a link there, and then I can go on and share my screen, and we can talk about requirements.
Sorry, I was trying to go refresh my memory of the Hacker News post. I'm not sure which pieces you're specifically talking about, Ryan. One thing that we've called out in here is being able to surface this info on somewhere like GitHub. So I'm not sure what the relationship is with the dashboard and the security overview page that's displayed on GitHub. So I would be curious to hear more sort of about that and how these things can all work together in that capacity too.
Yeah, I'll just give a really quick overview. I don't want to take too much time from Kay, but a lot of things that we talked about in the past was there's two pieces actually to the identifying security threats metrics dashboard project. God, we need a better name. And there's the UX, the actual dashboard part, but there was also a second equal piece, which is the API for everything. So all of the metrics that were gathered, and we have, yes, some intangible things, but also some very automatable things was the goal as well. So like when you listed your requirements, I'm like, yeah, those are things we've been talking about for months as well. So the idea was that, yeah, there'd be the centralized dashboard, but other projects could pull it in as well using the API, including GitHub. And we had that conversation with Maya and Jamie as well a few months ago, and something that they were interested in. So in that aspect, it seems like those goals are very similar, which is not a bad thing. I mean, if we're accruing towards it together, that's fine, right?
Okay, yeah, that's helpful.
Okay. So just a quick recap. What we've done previously is we took each of the three kind of related projects, best practices badge, security metrics, and scorecard, and we identified goals, scenarios, and use cases and requirements. And then we made a pass at creating common goals, scenarios, and requirements across all three. And there's more work that we could do on this. We just spent one meeting on it. I didn't want to get too down in the details of it. I'm hoping to kind of stay a little, let's get information together, rough information together, but stay a little higher level until we sort of all have a picture of where we're going with this, and then maybe we can come back and refine. Anyway, so then for our next discussion, what I thought we could do is talk through what our North Star is. And then once we have a rough idea about a North Star, come back and create a roadmap. So how we get from where we are, working toward this North Star, and how all the different pieces fit in. So that was my plan for today, was to talk about the North Star. So what I called the North Star was a security metadata store. Maybe we can discuss more about what the name of it is. Right now, it's like metrics dashboard. I was trying to pick something that didn't, that was slightly different from any one of the existing three, but kind of rolled all three up. Anyway, so, and I thought of this, what I'm describing as a North Star is one option for a North Star. Maybe we have different ones, but let's walk through this one, and then, we can see. Certainly, I'm not tied to anything that was here. It was just, my first pass at trying to coalesce things. So I said in this option, we described what's needed at an abstract level for security metadata store that meets the common requirements that we defined earlier in the document. And then what I thought we could do is identify both the requirements for the overall system, the metadata store system, and then existing technologies that could fill the requirements. And so the way I started to break it out is to, into components of an abstract model. And again, we can add or tweak these as people think. So I think we want a data store, and we'll talk about requirements for that later, and then a data model and exchange formats and an API for putting data into the store and retrieving data from the store. We want tools for gathering data, so pulling them from locations. And then I think we probably also want some tools for data submission, so where people can push information into the store. And then I think we want a presentation layer, which I'm calling a dashboard. So,
Kay,
yep.
quick question for you.
Yep.
What's pushing you towards having to storing the data? I mean, if your inputs are things like the best practices badge and the scorecard, you can just request that interactively. I mean, I can believe that you need to store, but what's the data set that's pushing you towards needing to store it?
Good question. So, the scenario that I'm thinking of, and this is me sort of very close to what we're hoping for, what we Microsoft are hoping for from OpenSSF. So we are looking for there to be one source of data, one API that we can use to gather information and make decisions about our consumption of open source. And so, my thought process is if there's one store, one API, everybody feeds into that, then it's very easy for us as we're consuming.
I'm not arguing against one API. I'm asking, do you need to store anything? Because you could have a single API, and that system then goes out and gathers data from elsewhere.
So maybe I'm in there real quick and answer, or Mike, if you want to take it, that's fine. Go for it.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, so we're taking a pretty big step back here, I think, compared to what this working group originally had, some months ago. And it's fine. I think it's okay to get some clarity here, given the confusion. But we had in the past, there's a gigantic spreadsheet of a ton of different metrics that this group identified that we would want to collect. And so it was everything from, has a security review been run on this project? What analysis tools are running it regularly? Does it have a reproducible build? Like, there's just a ton of different things. So all of those metrics would be stored per project. So we need some sort of data store backend to maintain that.
Okay, I think for some of it you don't need, but if it's something like, hey,
for some of it, yes.
Yeah, if somebody's done a security review, I can believe that that needs to be stored somewhere, obviously. can't run that.
Yeah, definitely.
That might
some
not
of
be
it
done.
Is live queryable, but yeah.
Right. Go ahead.
Sorry, I think the other, like, a really super clear reason why we did the physical data store is so that you can run things across, and you can say, what are the top 10 healthiest projects or top 10 least healthy projects that have had a vulnerability in the past year, or anything else where you can't enumerate the universe in order to answer that query.
Okay, yeah. Sorry if I'm asking embarrassing questions, but I always try to look for how can I make this simpler? And if I can't, I can't. But throwing away a data store makes things easier, unless you need one.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Okay. No, I appreciate your asking that question, and the same for anyone else. Please check any assumptions. All right, so I'll stop there and see, just check where people are feeling about, one, the approach, start with North Star, then look at roadmap, and then also, are there, is this idea of, a store that has an API, that has a presentation layer, is that what people are thinking? Are we on the same page there? And then also, are there other components that I'm missing that should be listed there?
I mean, I'd be so bold as to say, given the history of this group, I think we're all in agreement that that is the plan. I like that we're writing it all down, but I don't think we should go through an exercise of necessarily rehashing it, but maybe make the assumption and then move from there. And if people have concerns, we can revisit. I'd rather clarify maybe for the new people rather than redecide, if that makes sense. But given that, I don't think there's anything controversial about what you wrote either. So
let's hear from Kim or Dan or David or others. Questions or concerns?
certainly not with the having a single API to yank in data from many other places and then be able to present it. I think it might be useful to at least briefly chat with the Chaos folks who are also interested in gathering data about open source. I don't think that they've. My understanding, though, is that you want to be able to type in like a name of a repo or a URL of a repo and learn all about it, right? Is that at least one of the use cases below?
Right.
So who yanks data into, how you exchange data between various other systems may have to be worked out case by case. But I mean, certainly the desire to be able to do that seems very, very reasonable.
Okay. Kim, just checking.
Sorry, I've got two kids running around here. Can you tell me what the question is again?
Sure. I'm just wondering if this way of thinking about kind of what our North Star is, which is that we're trying to get to a central store that has data about software projects that people can view and query, and external sources can provide data into it. Does that picture of a North Star make sense to you?
Yeah, I don't think it's something that like for the scorecard projects that we're doing or interested in, but I think this looks fine for whatever use case you have outlined here.
Okay, so I'm thinking maybe the scorecard project is a tool that dumps data into this store.
Yeah, exactly. You can call it and get the data that you need and
Okay.
export it through an API or UI or whatever.
Hello.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Sorry, Kamlesh Parekh. So I remember we discussed about adding adapters which will collect data from different sources and dumping in a single data store. This was our initial design during our initial meetings, if I remember right. So I remember checking the scorecard tool as well. The scorecard tool could be just one of the adapters for the metrics project, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay. And a data store, I'm not, that's one part where I got confused, because we are discussing, should we need a central data store or not?
No, I don't think well, I'm just, I just wrote down that we do need a data store. So, and it sounds like now we're all in agreement that a data store is something that we need.
All right, because I was wondering how else can we do it without a data store? Because especially since we are considering getting or gathering data from multiple sources, if we plan on doing it on the fly, it'll just be too slow. That's my understanding.
I think that decision has already been made, but there are alternative designs. One is I'm going to gather data from 12 sources. I send out the request to all 12 sources simultaneously. If it takes 5 seconds for each one to reply, the one takes the longest, maybe one of them takes all 5 seconds. Then it'll take 5 seconds to get the data. You don't make requests sequentially. Just do it all in parallel.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work if there's data that you can't request the data from easily, or if you want to do very, very large data sets. I mean, this is what Kay just wrote in. The data store allows researchers and consumers to run queries across multiple software projects. The highlight right there. If you have to analyze, say, I want to analyze all open source software, that's a different story.
Also, I think if we start relying on real-time, making API calls in real time, I think even the resource consumption would become huge. Let's say, like you mentioned, if it takes 5 seconds for one project's data, and let's say there are 1,000 users just looking at the dashboard, that will bog down the system.
Right. Well, I mean, yes, but I think we've already said that we're going to have a data store. So I think you're arguing for what's already been agreed to.
Right. We agree to a data store. Okay. All right, so I think then let's move on. At some point, I think we might want to create a nice little diagram, but I don't have that for now. So so for data store, I started to write down some requirements. So I think we have some performance metrics. I'm not sure what those are, but maybe the characteristics we want are that
Also,
we have something in like how many, like roughly how many people we would want to access it at the same time.
I would actually defer like some of those decisions out. Yeah, and just say this should scale to meet the needs. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this should just like work in the cloud and like magically scale somehow. But
that reminded me of another thing. So do we have a consensus, or do we have a set place where we will be deploying all these systems? Meaning, is it in Microsoft Cloud or is it somewhere else?
I don't. Yeah. No, I don't think we should at this point.
Okay.
Like
because if we are moving closer to the implementation side of things, I think that would be important, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Although I think conceptually, we'll keep it as a container and run it in a container, in which case we can deploy it anywhere, have it be kind of well designed so we can put different pieces in different places, but we shouldn't rely on any particular, like especially cloud vendors SaaS level. We're not going to tie this directly to Azure or
you mean all the managed services, right?
I mean, well, I don't think we have anybody representing Amazon, but like if we did, it wouldn't be to an AWS, like tie it like hard to AWS or Azure, yeah, anything like that.
That I agree, but I just want to know, because how will that decision go forward? Do we have any guidelines to think of?
Well, yeah, we'll have to,
Google Cloud or Microsoft Cloud?
So I would like to defer that until later. So just for this discussion, let's try to stay a little higher level, and then we'll get to that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So other requirements. So I think we want public read access, and we want private write access, meaning ACLed write access, and not everyone can write to it. Another thing I had is immutable. So I think we want the data that goes there to stay there forever. And it can be corrected, but that would be done by another record.
Okay, so you don't mean
tell me at any point if that's too much. What's that?
You don't mean truly mutable, you mean versioned, right? Immutable versions?
I think I mean truly immutable. So
immutable means nothing can change. So the data will never change forever. I write it on stone tablets.
Right.
And immutable versions is what you're after.
Oh, sorry?
David, I think you're right. I think immutable versions is really kind of what you're after, because if there's a process to update or modify or correct, then it's versioned, right? And then that doesn't change.
Right.
Why? Why is immutability? Is it for auditability or?
Yeah. So this is coming to me, and we don't, we might not need to get stuck into this. We can discuss it later. But this is coming to me because the work I've been doing with software bill of materials, and for software bill of materials, we think of a bill of materials as something that it's created and then it's immutable. And if someone wants to make changes, then they create a new record that points to the previous record. And so you can still chain these things together to see versions, but each change remains separate so that you can have that auditability and the traceability over time.
So since part of this, we can have it. If you just put a question mark or like a needs more discussion, next set, just so we don't forget.
Right.
And the reason for that is, we can collect a pretty large amount of data about each one. And if we're doing this on a kind of continuous basis, so I want to see how the project health changes over time, or the contributor list changes over time, like I'm kind of, maybe it's like functionally immutable, but like not actually immutable, because it doesn't matter. But I think we
can talk more about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to give an example, maybe the on a software bill of materials, one of the challenges has been the list of the software technically is fixed, except when you find out that in fact this component contains something else that they didn't mention before, or it has a publicly known vulnerability now that we didn't know about before. And so things are fixed until they aren't. And so it's hard.
Right. Yeah, it's just a different, I mean, we need the ability to make changes over time. It's just that in our SBOM world, we've been thinking that the way you fix it is you create a new bill of materials that has the changes that links back to the previous. So anyway, we'll discuss more later. And then I just added, go ahead.
So sorry, for public read access, do we want to consider say embargoed, for lack of a better word, read access to certain things? So for example, if we find a non-public vulnerability in something, we being like, now I'm talking me as Microsoft, not as OpenSSF. What should any private organizations, like, if we make a decision to share that with the OpenSSF through this dashboard, either to get it to the maintainers or to CERT or to whatever, should we just assume that anything that goes to OpenSSF is 100% public, and that's totally fine? Or would there be situations where there should be some things accessible through the dashboard to certain individuals, but not to the public?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think we should talk about it. I am very nervous about including that sort of stuff that's not public, because everything that you include in a database where some is public and some is not creates problems.
Yep.
And risks. And I'm not sure we want to, I'm not sure we want to go down that path, but we should talk about it for sure.
Cool. Perfect.
Okay. So let's put it on as with a question mark. Thanks, David, for adding the question. Okay, and because I would like to try to get through all of these today, and we've got 20 minutes left, I'll try to move us a little faster. So I identified a couple of possible stores that we could use. So I know the best practices badge has a store currently. David's just writing RDBMs, PostgreSQL, RDBMS. There's another project called Recore, and this is something that Luke Hines from Red Hat, and Luke is on our TAC, has been working on. And this is a store for supply chain metadata that uses the Trillium as the backend, and Trillium is an immutable store that's used with immutable data store that's used with currently DNS records. It tracks changes to DNS records, or that's what it was originally created for, but it can be used for other things. So that's one idea. There's another project that's called the DBOM project that is just coming out of the Linux Foundation, and that's a store that it's an overall storage system that allows storing things like software bills of materials, hardware bills of materials, other types of supply chain metadata, and it has already an access control model. Again, it's just coming out, so I don't have all the details for it, but it might be something that we could look at later. I wrote down graph database, just as another type of database, and so there could be others. Is there something that's been discussed in the security metrics project so far that I should list here as well? We don't have to decide this today. I'm just writing down, things for us to consider.
I mean, so I've gone through bouncing back and forth between Postgres and a graph database for years now, and graph database always sounds awesome until the implementation starts, and then it starts to fall apart. And then you realize that like Postgres is awesome, and kind of we're nowhere near the scale or the complexity, and we never will be, where we outgrow Postgres, in my opinion. The other ones are interesting, Recor and DBOM, but because we're storing arbitrary data, like I don't know if we'd be fighting with them to store like arbitrary things in there. And again, like Postgres has been around, since the beginning of time. It works great. If we need something that it can't do, then we should consider others. But I feel like that should be the default.
Yep. I would agree. Postgres is simple. It works for lots of things. Start there. But really, the correct the correct thing is, what data are you storing? How are you going to access it? Then figure out the store. But in my experience, I'm a big believer in simplicity, and Postgres is super easy to deploy and scales great.
Do we
for
know
many situations?
Ballpark how much data we're talking about here? Is this gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes?
I would expect small number of terabytes at most.
Well, let's see. The last we actually did a count at my previous organization, the number of live active open source projects. It was in the millions. And I'm imagining that you're probably going to store maybe, 1,000, well, probably not, probably 100 metric values, maybe, or so for each one. Maybe 1,000.
No, bigger than that. Because what we're going to do is we're going to store like the list of contributors, and like so expect us to store more data than you can think of, but not hundreds of megabytes. So a megabyte per project, so that's about a terabyte, 2 terabytes.
Big yawn. That's not going to stretch Postgres at all. I can run that on my laptop.
Yeah. Even if we included things like all of the findings from every tool run across every project, it will add a couple more terabytes, but it still will never hit petabytes.
The issue also is, how structured do you need? I mean, a list of contributors for each project is not a complex. It's not a complex graph. Right. If you actually needed to store, say, an entire Git repo but yet represented as a graph, maybe a graph database. But
yes.
I don't think we want to go there. There are the tools to do that.
Okay, let's move on, because those are kind of getting us to some more implementation details. So I think we need a data model, an exchange format, and an API. And these are how external tools interact with the data that's in the store. So what I had for requirements, and I don't think this is comprehensive, is support for projects, repos, packages, binaries, possible other items in the future. So those are the sort of the top level items that would be queried against. And then support for existing best practices. So elements that are defined in the existing best practices badge, security metrics and scorecard projects, and possibly others. Let me kind of jump through the rest of this, and then we can come back. So I identified possible data models. So we're working on something in the SBOM, the number of groups that are working on defining a standard SBOM format. There's also an API for the best practices badge. There's a tool for storing, or an API for storing supply chain metadata, Grapheus. So there's, they've defined an API, so that might be something to follow. I'm not sure what Recor has currently, and I know that the DPOM project has something, but I don't know the details of that right off. So those are a few items to consider. Oh, and somebody put APIs in here, so REST is an API and GraphQL.
You can blame me.
Okay. All right. Thanks, David. All right. So thoughts on this? I don't know. I'm interested again in what was thought of before for security metrics. Were we planning to try to use an existing API or come up with something separate? So that might be, maybe it's a create our own. Let's see. Oops,
if this is a consolidation of other secure, I mean, in many ways, it's going to be driven in some sense by the other data sources that can be brought in. I would think.
Yeah, I was going to make kind of a similar comment. My perspective on this of just web services and APIs in general, especially when we're doing sort of a aggregate of things, is that the simplest thing is to just stick with the basic REST API and use JSON as your data format, and you get a lot of really simple, easy interoperability. And then if there's a need to grow beyond that, as far as like exchange formats and to be able to sync data back and forth, great, we can write some tools to do that, but we can iterate on that in the future. But keeping it lightweight and let's just drop some basic JSON and some REST APIs and then go from there. I think we can make a lot of progress pretty quickly that way.
Yeah, particularly if we identify just here's a few data sources to start with. I've already talked with some of you folks. We actually modified the CI best practices badge to make it easier to yank data into this. So in the case of the best practices, happy to make changes to make extraction of whatever you need super easy. And just the scorecard, best practices, maybe there's a couple other sources, identify those and make that the starting point. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, exactly. I think if we start with that'll get us going, and then we can easily show progress and we can expand from there, right? I mean, once we've got some infrastructure for a REST API and we're working with JSON, we can even store that, on some sort of data store very, very easily. Like, it just makes everything so much easier. And I think it's easy to customize in the future.
Okay. Let me just check with Dan, Lawrence, or Kim if you guys have any input on this.
Not really, no. Simple
Okay.
sounds good.
Yeah. I haven't looked in detail what the Chaos folks have done, but don't they have some tools that try to gather some data? Not necessarily security, unfortunately, but open source data, maybe as a starting point, or at least grabbing some data from them.
Yeah, what I've seen from Chaos is that they have the tools. I couldn't find, and maybe I didn't look hard enough, the place where I can just go, like they've already collected it for me. That would be super useful. Having the tool is now I have to set up infrastructure to run a private Chaos instance, which we could do. We should actually, I will invite some folks from Chaos to the next meeting.
Yeah, I think they had talked about setting up something a year ago, and I was very excited, and then I hadn't heard anything from them since. So, so maybe they've set one up, but I fear they haven't. But I think that's what people are looking for, and you know what? If they haven't, well, maybe this will prod them into something, or work together with them. That'd be better.
Okay, we have just 8 minutes left, and I have a couple more things. So I have, tools for gathering and submitting metadata, and then also presentation layer. But I think what we're arriving at is that this security metrics dashboard is our store where we pull data into, and that's where information can be, so when we talk to developers and to researchers and to, corporations or GitHub. Our long-term story is the metrics dashboard is a place that they can come to for a summary of information across multiple data sources. And then I think that best practices, let's see if people are on the same line. I'm going to do the roadmap. This might be too strong of a way to say it, but single source of truth.
Well, careful of that word "truth," and what exactly mean? Single source of security metrics for open source projects, right?
Yeah.
I'd say centralized, maybe not single.
Okay, that's a fair point.
Okay, centralized.
Okay. Centralized, web accessible. Because you can run, if you download the scorecard and run it, you can finally get a metric for some metrics, and the same for the best practices, but you're not going to get the whole set.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I wanted to make just a quick note of that for the scorecards thing, given that it's like a locally run thing currently. Just make a note for future, like how do we integrate those metrics per se? Will they push to us? Will we run a local copy in our service or something? How exactly will we do that?
Yeah.
Well, I have an idea on that. I would propose this as the starting point. If somebody requests a project and it's never been run before, locally, the site would run the scorecard and cache the results, and maybe if that last cache result has aged out, run it again. Same for the best practices badge. Best practice badge you can just query online. The data is what it is, but I would expect that for some of this you would rerun occasionally. You would run if you've not seen it before, and rerun if it's too old.
Okay, so best practices badge. I think I think of roadmap. So this is a source of
selected data of some data. I guess some source of best practice data.
Source of data provided by maintainers about security practices used for their projects.
Are we putting all these details in this page? Is that
again?
Are we making all these notes on this particular page, which I just sent? Is that the link?
No. So there's a link in the meeting for today. There's a link to the North Star Security Metadata Store. That link is what Kay is editing right now.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Also,
scorecards.
Sorry. Kay, were you saying something?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
No, I just asked for the link where you are making all these notes. But in the meantime, we just discussed how should we run scorecard or similar tools. So I already posted in our chat. I was thinking if we decentralize all these data collectors, it might even become easier or convenient for contributors. For example, let's say we register an application. So a user or a developer can register on our system, they get an access token, and they can run their own data collectors and keep pushing to our system. So if we have a queue and handle, once you push it to the queue, we can sanitize, do whatever we want in a synchronous manner so that you won't be bogged down. I believe that kind of decentralized approach might help us more, even for better adaptability.
Let's add that for future discussion.
All right.
Okay, so we have just a couple minutes left. I feel pretty good about thinking about how these things kind of map together. Again, a diagram, might help us in the future, but how do other folks
we
feel
need a
about this?
name. I feel okay with this, but we need a name.
We are focused on the easy problems, David. Not
For the security metrics project, we need a name.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, for this, what I'm envisioning is a website, open source security metrics for projects, but it needs a better name than that.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Oh, I like awesome.
I think awesome's already taken. Oh,
Yeah, it
OSS.
is.
All right.
Oh,
Gee, Mike,
right.
where did you ever come up with that idea?
Okay.
It's for
All right,
sale.
we have just 1 minute left. Thoughts on what our next step should be? So what should we do in our next meeting?
Yes.
Maybe continue through these items.
So I'd love
Think
to
about-
see us kind of work a little bit more asynchronously on this document. So rather than going through the doc like every meeting, which I think is good to review, but not necessarily filling it out per se. If we could encourage everybody to go in here and maybe add some notes, add what they think the requirements are, and then we can have that discussion, and then maybe we can start iterating just a little bit faster.
Okay.
Yep.
So it would be, so we'll continue, working on requirements, and we'll ask people to provide data ahead of time that we can review.
Yeah, I think that'd be useful.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay.
All
right.
I've got to run.
Go ahead.
Cool. Thanks, David.
Okay. Bye, David.
Yeah.
I just had one last quick thing in the remaining 30 seconds. We are, so as part of OSS Gadget, which is the open source like Swiss Army knife that we have on GitHub, and there's a link to this in the meeting notes, where we just started doing a metadata normalization tool. Meaning, so what this means is, if you go out and you query NuGet or NPM or Ruby Gems, the metadata that you get back is like structurally different, and sometimes it means different things. We're going to normalize that into one common format. So regardless of what ecosystem you query, you get back it's organized by whatever it is, like releases, and the releases have authors, and the authors are a name and an email address, things like that. So we're going to use that or I would think we should use that as part of the metadata collector and keep as much of that kind of hard, like just squirrely logic out of the dashboard itself, and just delegate that off to another tool. So that's what we're doing. So if somebody would like to contribute to that, right now we have like a proof of concept done for NPM. We want to do all of the other ones. So there's like 10 that we need to do. So we're certainly happy to take contributions or feedback.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Michael, can you add the URL for that?
It's in the meeting notes.
Good. Okay.
Into the agenda. Yep.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.